Hi everybody! We are serving new blends with the most creative minds in design and architecture. So let's find out what this episode has in store for us. Your ICED Macchiatos is serving.
Piero Lissoni is a designer and interior architect that has been one of the greatest names in the world of design for over 30 years. A sober style in product design and an outstanding creative vision in the conception of interior projects are the distinctive features of his unique signature, which has shaped hundreds of furniture products and dozens of projects in the world of contract, especially in the hospitality sector. Piero Lissoni's activity also ranges in graphics, landscape architecture, and brand identity consulting. With a studio in Milan and one in New York, Piero Lissoni is the creative director of Alpi, Boffi, Living Divani, Lema, Lualdi, Porro, and San Lorenzo. In 2018, he designed for the latter the interiors of the SX88 model with innovative and original solutions, leaving an enduring mark on the nautical sector, a sector he had already explored with success back in 2007 with the Tribù motor yacht, a genuine floating villa which in terms of style and interior choices represents a forerunner of current trends. Rigor and simplicity are the main traits of his philosophy, combined with attention to proportions, details, and harmony. Piero Lissoni has received numerous prestigious awards and today is rightfully considered as one of the masters of international design.
Un ICED Macchiato intense, ICED Macchiatos, rich in taste. Hi Piero.
Buongiorno.
So, I would like to start from the music. I saw a pic of Kate Richards on your website, and I wanted to understand more. Why that pictures?
Wow, first question in the morning. It would take a double iced, but without milk. Let's start. Why Keith Richards? First, he's a symbol of my generation. I'm younger than he is, but he's part of our generation. Second, because he continues to be revolutionary. He's the guitarist in the greatest band of all times, but he remains on the borderline for life anyway. I think that's wonderful. So, Keith Richards forever. Then, when you take him out of this context, out of this cliché, he's an English gentleman who speaks with a posh accent, a true aristocrat.
But does music play a role? Piero's creative part?
I don't know if it has a direct influence, but music plays a fundamental role. It's like asking me if you can live without literature, poetry, photography, art. Music is a part of it. But I would say it is fundamental. I have no specific passions. I range from classical music, preferably putting it in the great mare magnum of Baroque music, to the Sex Pistols. Then, every once in a while, I raid the new music. Yes, but very carefully.
Very gently.
That's right, very carefully.
I read about you that in the first place you feel like a humanist. And designing is part of your life. I thought and asked myself, do you really feel like an architect?
Let's start with another point of view. In such a complicated life, and I'm talking about my life, As far as I'm concerned, it's very difficult to distinguish what a passion is from a profession. So I choose the former. To be able to do this life, you have to be partially schizophrenic, so you have to be able to move in parallel paradoxes. I feel a humanist because I'm Italian, I'm European, and I'm Milanese. And it's all based on these three elements. The cultural model is something you're born with, it's in your DNA. You breathe it. I never liked the idea of being a scientific, precise, creative person. I like the ability to move between parallel worlds. Technically, then, being a humanist. But I'm an architect as well, and I want to be an architect. And I really don't like the idea of the typically Anglo-Saxon distinction. Are you an architect who does facades, or are you an architect who designs interiors, or are you a designer, but product or industrial? A nonsense that only an Anglo-Saxon could think of. Therefore, I am a humanist architect.
So you choose to be and work as an architect? Or would you have done something else?
Listen, already being an architect is a bad job that sucks energy out of you every day. Had I been more skilled, I'd have been a ski instructor. I wish I did it, and among other things, I actually did do it to pay my studies at university. I'm going back one step. I like being an architect, and I'm very happy to have done my studies and to have absorbed almost everything from the Politecnico of Milan, which is a strange environment. If you're strong-willed and you like this discipline, it's the right place where you can make it, or else you're lost in thin air. At the Politecnico, they taught me an extraordinary thing: curiosity. I don't know if it's the same at other universities. I saw a few universities around the world, both as a student and as a visitor. But the model that exalts curiosity, I found it in very few places. And Milan taught me to be both curious and an architect.
Curiosity is a key that opens many horizons and stimulates you. It is nice to discover that the Politecnico also played this small role in your journey.
The British claim that curiosity killed the cat. In my opinion, a cat that's not curious is not a cat. It's absolutely crucial to be curious and to go out looking for trouble, or it would all be such a bore.
Curiosity drives you to risk and can therefore jeopardize the end result. I'm talking about the Anglo-Saxons.
Yes, but the beauty of risk lies in always being on horseback. Here I go back to Keith Richards, between a sort of pragmatic and rebellious model. On the one hand, you have to be disciplined, and on the other hand, you can be an anarchist. If you cannot balance the two views, risk becomes a dull model. You either become incredibly dangerous if you take too many risks, or you become incredibly dull because you don't take them. You need to balance them. You have to know how to hold steady, and you have to dose this kind of mixture that is not chemistry but something else. If you make a mistake, then instead of a cocktail, you'll end up with a mess.
I was reading about you. about your enthusiasm with a light mood that we will ascribe to a child, beyond the greatness of a thought or a project, be it small or large. But the important thing is the enthusiasm it can conjure up. Correct?
Oh yes, but like all children, sometimes it can get temperamental, so you always have to put it in this category of risk and whimsy. If you're not a kid, what kind of life do you lead? You have to wake up every morning with the enthusiasm of a child. You wake up and say, what kind of new game shall I invent today? And so you start your morning. And with the same curiosity, everything you have done up until yesterday serves as an experience. Even if your new slingshot doesn't work, then I don't mind. I look forward to something even newer. That's the beauty of being a child, is that you solve a series of previous problems, build problems and solve them, but the next day you invent new ones. And you have to get creative with that. In fact, my clients fear me every time we start a new project, whatever it is, architecture, design, or graphics, because they know that I more or less correct previous mistakes, or I take a part of the previous project, I put it into the new project, because maybe they are not mistakes anymore, but in the meantime, I invent new ones. So every time I put the wrong elements into the plans, always, I solve them and invent new ones. And from this point of view, this creative level of inventing nonsense is always very much alive. I will tell you, as a kid, I have a lot of fun. I don't know if my clients have as much fun as I do, but nobody is perfect.
From child to professional adolescence. If I say Milan, Via dell'Orso,
I'm reminded of a company that made photocopies, small at the time, or rather big because it had a lot of weird machines. It was called Eliografica. And when I finished high school, I decided I wanted to be an architect, even though I had actually had that idea before. You know, you actually decide when you're a kid. And I think that's the difference. Here now, maybe I'm getting too serious. It's a bit like sports. You cannot decide too late to become a top sportsman. Either you decide to become a top sportsman when you're a child and learn this kind of matrix, or you'll become an excellent tennis or football player, but just in the championship of your neighborhood. If you want to play top-level games, you have to start earlier. And that's what I did too. I started earlier, just to make some money, making copies and delivering them. I wanted to get into the world of architecture. And from there I started to establish, as they say in English, a link, or rather a network. And from there I drew my net and caught some fish. That's how it all began. I started working in very small studios, working on the Lettre set, which I think now it only works with the glyphs of the pharaohs. Then we removed the screens, we erased parts of the drawings, put the razor blades on the transparencies. In short, I was stepping into that world I wanted to live in. But I started from the lowest ranks. And for a long time, I was a slave. I worked, went to university, and then at night I worked again. There you learn. It's amazing how much you acquire. Almost like breastfeeding. You get a sense of project into your DNA. And at the time, I lived in very untidy, messy architectural studios with all the typical romantic architects' grotesque. changing clothes at the last minute, delivering 3 minutes later than the exact deadline, all according to the romantic rules of this business. But you learn the disciplinary model, and I learned it.
So, it is an ingredient.
I also learned the ropes, possibly more on the anarchist side, but at the same time I could get to know the metrics of this profession. Some applied it very well, others did everything they could not to apply it. But you have been training since you were a kid to do that. Then maybe you grow up to become an architect.
Well, a bit of success too, I would like to say.
Yes, it is part of the training.
So, getting more into the planning part. Compared to the projects you are working on or the ones you are working on, there are many private houses. Each house means different owner, so different style, with definitely different requests. But are they more attracted by a style or a designer's names?
I don't know. Poor sacrificial victims. You see, they're attracted by so many things. In the end, when you design a creature as complicated as a private house, because it's very different from when you design public spaces, a factory, an office, a hotel, a shop. When you design a private house, you enter into a sort of strange union, straddling intimacy. And, well, how to put it? You enter a kind of dream zone. You're not on one side nor on the other. But whoever calls on you must be brave as a lion, and you must be too when choosing them. I prefer to be always very precise. Very often I refused even very beautiful projects because I didn't like the clients. Because at some point I realized that things weren't working out between them and myself.
There was no understanding.
This sort of elective affinity would never flourish. And when you're a designer and you design such a complex creature as a private residence, either you find an elective affinity or it's better to let it go. And very often, I admit, very arrogantly, I have turned away. Because when you design a house, at the end of the day, you have to consider something very precise. They pay, and you design your home. They just happen to live in it. After that, you collect a series of technical elements. 1 room, 5 rooms. More social, less social. You cook more, less cooking. You eat a lot, you don't eat. You need a lot of shared space, or you're very private because you have a lot of books or you prefer to listen to music. These are the features. But once this part of it is over, from there it becomes my home, and I don't accept discussions anymore. And I leave it empty because I like to give some pretty empty plans. From that moment on, it's back to being my client's home with everything that's required, even the things I would never put in there. But up to that point, they pay, and I build my house.
Only after there is a change of ownership.
Yes, only afterwards there's a change of ownership. But I like being this way, perhaps rude, perhaps radical, because when I hear some of my colleagues talk about the wonderful collaboration, this co-management of a project, they're telling me some juicy lies, and I'm being a gentleman. Actually, it becomes a very, very stressful, a strong confrontation. You don't really know who you are doing it for and why. Therefore, we might as well be very clear straight away. If you work for Piero Lissoni, those are the rules. Otherwise, everyone's cut loose.
I would like to take a step back. and make a little trip, not very far away, because we have a motorway that connects the center of Milan to Brianza. We are back in 1986, when a very well-known company is called Piero and asking him to review all his corporate identity. What are your emotions about that period? Do you miss the 80s?
Well, the 80s were a good time. It was the beginning. It's like when you start a journey. You know where you start from, more or less, but you have no idea where you're going to arrive. I, for one, always started my trips like this. In 1980, I finished university. In 1980, I started to have some experience of other studios to understand how the world turns. Then suddenly in 86, I had no client, no job. A very young architect. In this case, the company was Boffi. They decided to choose me as their new art director. That is, when they phoned me, or rather when they spoke to my answering machine, because at the time the studio was like this. Half my kitchen table was my work table. That's how my office was. Half my kitchen table, a fax answering machine, which at the time had cost me all the money I didn't have. And it felt like buying Darth Vader's spaceship. When I was telling my friends, my colleagues, in short, all the overworked and penniless people I frequented, when they saw it, they asked me, "Piero, what did you buy? You're such a fool. This is multinational corporation stuff." To this day, it would not work even as a doorstopper. But that's another story. So my office began like this. And on the answering machine, I found this message. Paolo Boffi called me asking me if I have time and saying he wouldn't mind talking to me. It all started from there. No experience, but in different worlds. Different offices, different companies. So my adventure began. And here we are in 2020.
Well, that was a good start, I guess.
An extraordinary start, I must say. They were visionaries. And I was very brave. Very brave because, you see, it's very easy to look at everything topsy-turvy. But just imagine, you start a professional model and you have to put down on the table everything you know and everything you've absorbed. All of a sudden, like playing chess with just one pawn against a whole set of chess pieces. But you have to make your one move. You make it and try to knock everything off. And that's when I developed the nerve.
It was certainly fortunate to be chosen, but it also was a great responsibility.
Look, responsibility is part of our life. If you're not responsible, I don't know if I can say this, but you deserve to be considered, I say this as friendly as I can, a schmuck. When I hear my colleagues, even industrial designers, those on the other side of the barricade, telling you about these visionary worlds without having the minimum responsibility, they deserve being assigned amicably to that category. When you are in this business, you have to be exceedingly responsible. And I learned it in the field. I was a very young architect, starting a new life and learning from everyone. From the worker who mounts the kitchens, who tells you how things need to be done, to the engineer who looks down on you saying, "Sir, maybe we can't reach an understanding on this," and explains to you why, And you need to be quiet, even if he's telling you the wrong thing. Technically speaking, engineers only explain the wrong things to you, but that's another story.
Let us not tell them that.
No, let's tell them. In short, year after year, you learn, you improve. You give life to a model, an intellectual model, a cultural model, with a little courage and a lot of responsibility. And then...
And we have told the engineers what we think. And then there is the marine engineers. So we get to the shipyards. Voting.
Look, now I have to take a step back. Poor creature, engineers. Let us say the world could not be as beautiful without them. This we must acknowledge. But you know, when you are in architectural school, you have to know that it is divided in two. There's a kind of dark side of the moon. On one side there's the light that gives life to architecture, and on the other side the darkness which makes engineering. But you cannot survive without them. I did all the science stuff for the engineers. Those are wounds you carry with you your entire life, and you don't forget them. After that, everything I do with engineers. I do architecture with engineers, and sometimes they are more anarchists than I am. You discuss design with engineers, and on that as well, sometimes they are more anarchists than I, more extreme, tenser. So, I could do nothing without them. This is how I paid my debt. But I can remember them, so revenge is always on the scales. A revenge they will be carrying around for 500 years. Maybe I will explain it to my grandchildren, and they will explain it to their grandchildren. Let's just say there will always be light in the family. Look out, there is an engineer around. Nautical. 3 years ago, almost 4, I started working for San Lorenzo, and that's a different world. At the end of the day, you're seen as a stowaway, and I consider myself one. The nautical world is a private club worldwide, with nautical designers, nautical interior designers, with nautical engineers, and everyone thinks nautical. I, on the other hand, come from another world, and like every marooned soul, I land on this coastline with different rules. I'm an architect. I think like an architect, and boating and all those things, I do not care about them. I just know that a ship is a floating object and has very precise hydrodynamic rules, and I do not mess with them. But everything else I discuss. Lines galore, furnishings, the so-called naval interiors that would make Admiral George Nelson pale in distaste. Zebras, huge animals, objects. Are designed for 6-foot-tall model girls on heels 24/7. So I come in as an undocumented migrant and try to change something. I'm at least trying. And San Lorenzo offers me the chance to work with them, to take care of everything that is the San Lorenzo model, then redesign the San Lorenzo project as art director. Graphics, objects, how they look, how they build them, how they furnish them. And here we are.
From A to Z.
4 years later, we're still here redesigning boats. And I'm still a stowaway. And I strictly want to remain a stowaway.
And is there any other lands where you would like to take these clandestine bayings of yours that has not yet been explored?
The great thing about this job is that the surprises always start tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning, maybe someone will call me and ask me to interpret something. But we will find out in the morning. For now, meaning today, what I have is enough for me.
We started with K. Richards, The World of Music. And I would like to say at this point to consider the ICED Macchiatos as a bit like the dark side of Piero. Your words we discovered and lead a definitely exciting and interesting side of you. This gives the same buzz of today's taste of our coffee.
I hope so. But I have to tell you that the beauty of the adrenaline of designing a chair. For 3 years you remodel a prototype, and in parallel an engineering prototype is remodeled. And somewhere in the world, to make this chair, some chemist, some materials engineer invents a stuff to make this object. This is the dark side, or if you prefer, the bright side. And then after a while you see this thing done, finished and printed. Think of Cartel's Puma, an object that could only be made by inventing a completely new world made up of technology and material. And the shape. In the end, I drew very little. That shape came out like that because we went so far out of our way with the research that it could only come out like that. This is the adrenaline rush of my profession. Tomorrow, maybe someone else will ask me to do an equally adrenaline-fueled project. And here we are.
Thanks, Piero.
But now the coffee's on you.
Absolutely.